name is Chris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org, and I will be presenting The Law of Freedom Part 1, Understanding Law and Principle. This will go into law and principle more after defining the law of freedom in order to give a deeper understanding on what exactly is a law and a principle is, because we're going to talk about them in the first part and in subsequent parts to do a real deep dive into the law of freedom. So here is a slide showing the law of freedom and what it means, and an equation as developed by Mark Passio, who I think showed it in Anarchy in the Occult Part 3 a few years ago. So the law of freedom, I shorten it as LOF. I reference it as LOF to not have to say the law of freedom and use that much text all over the place. Simply stated, it means as morality increases or declines, freedom increases or declines. And we have these symbols here. We have this like E-looking symbol. That means the sum, total, or aggregate. And we have F for freedom. And we have M for morality. And I is the individual or an instance of M. So individuals doing morality and instance of morality, you can look at it both ways. And I starts at 0 and it goes to infinity, theoretically. Obviously, there's not an infinite amount of people, and there won't ever be an infinite amount of instances, but there's a lot of them. And the symbol in the middle is a symbol for proportionality. That means a corresponding constant ratio between quantities. And those quantities are freedom and morality. So the sum, total, or aggregate of freedom is proportional to the sum, total, or aggregate of morality. The law of freedom describes the dynamic that governs human freedom, which is morality. The total amount of freedom in an area is proportional to the total amount of moral behavior in that area. The more moral a population is, the more freedom emerges as the condition in that area. The more immoral a population is, the more slavery emerges as the condition in that area. And as an example of how it works for freedom, well, that's the total amount of freedom is proportional to the instance of morality or individual 1, 2, 3, onward and onward, added up. And the same for slavery. It's the instance or the individuals who create immorality, and how many there are is how much slavery you're going to have in that area. So is that the end? It's that simple, right? Well, yes, it can be. But do you understand why that is true? Why the law of freedom is something that is actually a law? Why is it true? Or are you just concluding it's true because it makes sense? So when it's presented, well, this can make sense. You'll be like, yeah, it totally makes sense. But just because it makes sense doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It can be a convincing argument, but what makes it true? Right? Do you actually know why it is true? I spent time analyzing why it is or is not true and how it operates in demonstrable ways that anyone can think about and verify. So that's what I'm going to do here, is trying to convey what I've thought about and convey how I've been able to verify and how you can verify it and how it's been demonstrated in human life, so that we can know that the law of freedom is something that is true, that exists. If you already have the detailed knowledge to deeply understand the previous basic explanation, then you understand the veracity of how the law of freedom functions. So then maybe you're not interested in this presentation, and that's fine. If you don't have detailed knowledge, then the rest of this presentation may interest you to understand why the law of freedom is true. Even if you understand how the law of freedom is true, you might be interested in going deeper to comprehend as much as you can about the law of freedom, and will gain value from the rest of this presentation. The law of freedom matters. Why should anyone care about the law of freedom or care to understand it? Because understanding the law of freedom and choosing the positive pathway in the aggregate of humanity leads to the result of not suffering as a species, which is currently not our condition. We are currently suffering as a species in the aggregate overall. Even if you personally, you got a super awesome life, you're still not in an optimal way of life because you don't even realize how your freedom is being stolen from you and how you're not living in true freedom and how that essentially makes you living in enslavement. We can abstract and understand a condition or state of living or existence as having the qualities and quantities of freedom or slavery. We can understand what creates more or less of those qualities and choose to amplify their presence through what behaviors we create into reality. Once the causal choice and behavior is created, we have no choice in the experience of effects as the resulting condition of degrees of freedom or slavery. People don't make the connection between the total quantity of behaviors and the condition that results from those behaviors. That objective morally right or wrong behavior determines if we're truly free or not. Law versus principle. What are laws of nature about? What do they say about the nature of the universe? What are principles? Are laws and principles the same or different? Let's take a look at what dictionaries and etymology have to say as to their meaning. Also, some philosophy about laws of nature. And let's see how laws of nature can help us understand more about aspects of reality. So here we have some dictionary definitions. And I just went and chose some sites that I found had like some decent aspects of the definition that convey the core meaning of what they define. Because as you can see here from Merriam-Webster, this is definition 6A. So there were 1 to 5 and maybe sub-definitions like A, B, or C within each one. So there's a lot of definitions, but I'm pulling out the one that relates to the laws of nature and what they mean. So law definition 6A from Merriam-Webster is a statement of an order or relation of phenomena that so far as is known is invariable under the given conditions. And these are going to be some key aspects of the definition, that it relates phenomena, that it's invariable under given conditions, specific conditions, certain conditions, and they produce certain results. Here's another one from the Cambridge Dictionary. It's a general rule that states what always happens when the same conditions exist. Again, given conditions, what always happens, it's invariable. Examples are Newton's laws of motion, 1, 2, 3, laws of motion, laws of nature and physics. And on the right side with principle. Principle is a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of belief or behavior or for a chain of reasoning. So principles are used in beliefs. They're used as a foundation for behavior. They're all at the fundamental layer of a belief or a behavior, what motivates behavior or chain of reasoning. They're in philosophy, principles are in philosophy. So principles are in philosophy as a truth, but they're also in as truths about general scientific theorem or law that has numerous special applications across a wide field. So here we can see how principle is often synonymous with law, and they're interchangeable when you're referring to scientific laws or physical laws. It's the same as referring to it as a scientific principle or physical principle. And another definition of principle is a basic idea or rule that explains or controls how something happens or works. So it's again the rule, and you saw how on the law side, you could have a rule. The law was a rule, but a principle is also a rule, because a principle can be referred to as a law. And it's all about talking about how things work. That's what laws and principles are getting at. It's about how things work. And we'll get into principles later on. We can see how principles, so-called principles, that humans have come up with are the criminal justice system. Well, is that really principled? And we're going to find out that no, it's not really principled. Not a true principle, it's a false principle. And then you can orchestrate rules, right? You have rules and explains or controls how something happens or works. So you can have a principle of the criminal justice system that explains how the criminal justice system works, and that there's rules in that system. But is that system itself based on true principles? So it's true that the principles that explain how it works, well, that's true about that system, but is that system based on fundamental principles, on fundamental laws? And we'll see that no, it's not. So then your derivative principles, like the ones you derive for, well, this is how the criminal justice system is going to work, and this is how it's going to explain how it works, and these are the rules of that system. Well, since the foundational principles in nature of the criminal justice system are flawed, then all the principles that are derived to construct that criminal justice system, they're also flawed and false. They're not true principles, they're false principles. And here we have some etymological definitions to get more into the nitty-gritty of the definitions. So we have law from Old Norse, lagu, law, collective plural of lag, as in layer, measure, stroke. So measure is important when you think about the symbolism of ma'at. Well, that had to do with measurement, and that was also, ma'at was a term for referring to law, morality, and truth. So we have measure here. So when you measure things, you can end up deriving principles or laws from those measurements of reality, or measuring behavior, which is how we come up with what the rules of morality are, and natural law, and the law of freedom, and how those are inherent in existence. So something laid down, that which is fixed or set, and fixed, we'll get to that summary of definitions of what a law is, and that's because it's immutable. It doesn't change, it's fixed. So a law is a statement in physics, etc., of an observed, established order or sequence or relationship of phenomena which is invariable under certain conditions. A statement of relation that is true under specific conditions, a mathematical or logical rule. Any statement of the relation of acts and conditions to their consequences. And a principle from Latin, principium, beginning or foundation, from princeps, first. A surface etymology is from primus, first, and seps, catcher. Principle is a fundamental assumption or guiding belief. That's what a principle can be. It can also be a rule or law of nature, or the basic idea on how the laws of nature are applied. An example is Bernoulli's principle. It can be a law of nature, plural laws of nature, like a physical law, which is a scientific generalization based upon empirical observation, a natural law, any number of doctrines in moral, political, and legal theory. So again, the legal theory, flawed foundation, so the whole legal theory premise has false principles in them because they're based on just what humans decide what they are, in contradiction to the fundamental moral principle, the moral law. Again, the same with political. So the moral, political, and legal theories, they're not harmonious. Ontological views about laws. So this is about, we're getting into the philosophy of laws of nature. And there's two main ones, these two ontological views, the study of the nature of being, of what a law of nature is. There's descriptive versus prescriptive. And the descriptive one is known as the regularity theory of laws, and it's non-prescriptive. So the regularity theory is where the theory states that laws describe a regularity or pattern from natural phenomena that we observe. They reflect what happens, describing relationships, but not enforcing them. They're contingent on patterns we observe, that we perceive in nature, which could change. And you'll see how the not enforcing them are based on things that can change because our perceptions can change, or how this is not too harmonious with the prescriptive view, because the prescriptive view is the necessitarian theory of laws of nature. I'm just abbreviating them as laws rather than say laws of nature, because that's what laws are. They're actually things that exist in nature. And the legal system laws are not true laws. They're a fabrication that can be in alignment with actual laws of nature, or they can be out of alignment, and they're not laws of nature. And they're just things that people invent for control, arbitrary dictates. So necessitarian theory of laws of nature is that laws of nature prescribe things that must happen. Laws make things happen. Laws are dictating how objects must behave under certain conditions. The laws, how things must behave are imposed upon objects and things in the universe, imposed by the laws. For example, an electron has a specific charge because a law of nature makes it so. The sun rises every day. All objects with mass attract each other. So these prescriptive laws that prescribe what must happen and make things happen, there's two ways that this could happen in the necessitarian theory. One is from the structure of the universe itself, or if it's not built into the structure of the universe, it's, I guess, a property of the entities, the causal power of objects. So there's a property within that aspect of matter at whatever scale that you're looking at it, whether it's an electron or something larger like a molecule, or something larger like a piece of wood. Well, there's things in it, there's properties within those entities that make it so that there's things that happen when there's interactions with other aspects of the universe, so that there's relationships that are formed and certain results that come about through those relationships. So the law of gravity, so when you're looking at the structure of the universe, you can say that the law of gravity itself is what makes massy objects attract. But if you look at it as properties of entities, well, you could say there's a hypothetical graviton quantum particle as a property of mass, which is what makes things attract. So these are ideas in the theory about what is making that attraction. When we talk about gravity, which I'll talk about more, when things attract, well, it has to do with mass, but is it something within the mass, like a hypothetical graviton, or is it this law, this thing that we're talking about as a law that is making that attraction happen? So these are two aspects within the necessitarian prescriptive theory of laws of nature. And when we're talking about ontology, the nature of being of these laws of nature, there's elusivity to it. So I call this ontological elusivity. Ontological views may be elusive to prove exclusively, as in, can we prove that it's only the descriptive theory and not the prescriptive theory? Or is it only the prescriptive theory and not the descriptive theory? But actually, when we look at the prescriptive theory, it includes the descriptive theory. The necessitarian theory includes the regularity theory, because when you're talking about this and you're defining it, these laws of nature, you're also describing that regularity or pattern which brings you to be able to say that, oh, well, that keeps happening. It's a pattern. It regularly happens. So then it's called a principle or a law. And then it's just taken a bit further in saying that, okay, well, that law is making it happen. But anyways, ontological views may be elusive to prove exclusively, but that doesn't negate the importance of laws to better understand how reality functions by explaining particular phenomenon, why they happen, or how the phenomenon was brought about, not why laws exist at all, why they work the way they do, nor where they come from. So when we're looking at laws, we're not talking about why they exist at all, why they work the way they do, or where they come from. We're just talking about why certain phenomenon happen and how the phenomenon was brought about. Because you're talking about things relating, interactions of relationships, and those interactions like mass and the distance between the mass, well, that produces the law of gravity, the law of universal gravitation, as Newton came up with, which is a good approximation as we're looking at it on Earth for how it happens. It's good enough to understand how it works. Specific conditions necessarily produce resulting conditions. We create statements or equations to describe those events, referred to as laws. They are good enough measurements for the precise functionality of the universe. We see a pattern about how reality works, then the pattern, regularity, it regularly happens, so it's a pattern that we notice, is recognized as a law. We describe it the best we can, but can't truly explain why it is that way. That is to say, why the law is that way, why the law exists. For example, we don't know why the law of gravity works out to be an inverse square law. Force is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between the bodies. And why not the inverse cube, or the inverse power of 4, 5, or 6? It is what it is. Law versus accidental truth. So when we're talking about laws, there's laws which are generalized truths, and then there's just accidental generalized truths, which are not laws. Necessity helps to differentiate laws of nature from accidental truths. For example, no human lives to be 122 years old. So far, that's been the case. It's either, I think haven't gone up to 122 or past it. We haven't gotten to 123. Maybe it's happened before, maybe it'll happen in the future, but so far that hasn't happened. But that's not a law. Or the accidental truth of all the coins in my pocket are dimes. Well, though true at the time that no human being has lived up to or past 122 years old, and all the coins in my pocket are dimes, it's not a physical necessity, hence the necessitarian theory. Someone could live beyond 122 years, or I can have more or less dimes in my pocket at any time. If physical necessity is ignored in determining what a law of nature is, then there are nearly a limitless amount of laws. Laws of nature rule out certain outcomes from occurring. which accidental generalizations don't. Laws are also universal in applicability and not contingent on human observation or understanding. Planets orbited around suns according to laws of physics long before humans figured that out. There are laws themselves that we discover and human approximations to those laws. So we discover through observation the patterns, the regularity, that things happen under certain conditions, you get certain results. So there's that thing in the universe that is like, okay, well, this is the way it works. And then we create scientific laws or other principles that are trying to approximate and give specifics about how that happens. So it might be that the actual way the universe functions, like behind the scenes and in the precision of how it all works, we might be off by a hair or a fraction or something. But in general, the law that we come up with the equation is a good enough approximation to those laws that we're reflecting through those statements or those equations. While laws and accidental or coincidental truths can be generalizations, the latter lacks necessity and universality, as in it applies everywhere. General summary of law. Law relates phenomena, something making something else happen or occur. They are inherent. They are a natural part of existence, nature, reality, not invented by anyone. They are invariable or immutable. They can't be changed. They're always that way. They're inviolable. They're unbreakable. They can't be violated. They are binding. They're mandatory, necessary under certain specific conditions. So under different conditions, well, it won't be binding, it won't be mandatory or necessary because the conditions are not present for that emergence of the effect as dictated, as reflected in the law, that the law makes it happen, or that it must happen according to the law because the law is a reflection of how the universe functions. So if your conditions are different, well, the conditions are not going to be the requirements necessary to fulfill the results that those, if the conditions that are reflected in that law were present, then those conditions would operate according to how the law states that they operate. Rules stating or describing what must happen, which is an effect, from the relationship, interaction, or behaviors of various conditions. Effect invariably follows a cause, and that's causality. The same conditions, the cause, equals the same result or occurrence, which is the effect. If X, then Y. It's invariable. It always happens. If you have X, those initial specific certain conditions, then you get Y. And that's what the law demonstrates. The law is reflecting that invariability of, given these specific conditions, you can reproduce it. If you can reproduce these conditions, then you'll always get the same result. And that's how the scientific method works. Initial conditions are causes. They generate an effect, and the new state condition emerges. For example, mass and distance can produce the gravitational force of attraction. The laws explain how the effect relates to its causal conditions. It describes the relation of cause to effect. How do we get from this condition to another condition? It doesn't explain why or how the cause is able to produce the effects. It's only looking at how there's a relationship between certain things present in the initial condition and also how that relates to what is produced. But doesn't explain, well, why does that happen? Why does the law work that way? Why is that law there? We can't go that deep into the causal explanation. We don't have those answers. It's a generalization, a general rule or equation based on empirical observations. Equations can be precisions or approximations of the inherent law in reality. And here are just a list of some physical laws to get an idea if you want to go look at what are these scientific physical laws. There's more than this. Here's just one, some that I found on a site listing them. So you can take a look at that. I won't bother mentioning them. So some ways that we can categorize laws of nature. We have deterministic laws, such as Newtonian mechanics. So an example of those is the first, second, and third laws of motion, which have to do with inertia, momentum, and every action has an equal opposite reaction, which is essentially cause and effect. The laws of universal gravitation, those are Newtonian mechanics. There's other laws, such as the ones from the previous slide. You have the law of inertia, or sometimes referred to as the principle of inertia. You have the laws of thermodynamics. So those are all in the deterministic laws. There's also probabilistic laws or statistical mechanics, and that's indeterminism in contrast to deterministic laws. These are indeterminate. So when we're dealing with social or economic development, there's laws about economics and how they work, like supply and demand. I think that one would fit there. I'm not sure if that's deterministic. It's probably indeterministic. Anyways, these are some categorizations I found for explaining how laws of nature can be categorized. But they're usually based in probabilities, like social things. It's not a given specific way that society must work, but there's a tendency. So when you look at psychology, they do studies in sociology and psychology of large numbers of people, or even psychological studies between individuals can vary. But in the end, even in epidemiology and medicine and other sciences, you can have probabilities. You take that certain results, you take a sample size of 1,000 people and you do an experiment, like the Milgram experiment on authority, and you'll get a result of like 65%, or you'll have side effects of drugs. Well, you'll have probability that the result is just a fluke, or does it have a strong correlation between a cause and an effect? The cause and effect are actually linked as a cause to an effect, and the correlation is strong, or it's just a weak, well, this is a perceived cause to the effect, but we don't really know because, the results vary too much, and there's not enough strong evidence to conclude that this is like happening very frequently. So unlike deterministic laws, they're not happening all the time. Maybe it happens 90% of the time or 70% of the time. But you keep repeating it and it keeps happening 70% of the time. So there's something happening, and there's other factors that might make it that it doesn't happen all the time, such as free will. Hence why in psychology and sociology, it doesn't always happen. Another probabilistic law, statistical laws, are quantum mechanics, the probability wave function, etc. And we also have natural processes, deterministic or not. We have chemical reactions where you can add baking soda and vinegar, for example, and that gives you the reaction, a kid's science experiment of the volcano exploding. Well, that's the double displacement reaction and the decomposition reaction. So you can look into that and other examples of chemical reactions and natural processes, such as water's boiling point is 100 degrees Celsius. Water's freezing point is 0 degrees Celsius. Types of principles. So there are different types of principles in our lexicon. Not all things declared as principles are true, though they are used as foundations. So again, remember that principles, a core aspect of it is it's fundamental, it's a foundation. So this is how we can have foundations within us, but not all of them are true. So we can have true principles that are based in truth, reality. They're true foundations. So inertia, causality. True principles as laws of science, gravity, inertia, causality, or true principles of philosophy, like logic. There's laws of philosophy, a system of logic, framework of logic, laws of logic, principles of logic, and also self-ownership, self-defense, non-aggression. These are all true principles. We can have professional or personal principles, and these are just things that are valued or established standards in that profession. So these are all foundations of a profession, or that you use personally as a foundation within you that you then use as a basis for how you're going to live your life, how you're going to base your actions upon and your behavior. So in programming, there's principles and standards like solid, dry, KISS, SOC. Scientific standards or scientific principles of how to do things in scientific research, such as objectivity, empiricism, inductivism. So a personal principle that someone can adopt is trust everyone, and that would be foolish. Or someone can adopt the principle of trust no one, and that's impractical. Or another good one is question everything you hear, read, or see, which is prudent to avoid being fooled. Question everything. And there's false principles, and these are justifications for how to behave or think, usually. They're false foundations. So looking at how survival or self-preservation is the highest law. And that's a foundational part of Satanism in the Church of Satan. And might makes right. Survival of the fittest or survival of the strongest. Again, part of Satanism. Or authority is necessary for human society and order. So you can't have order without authority. You can't have human society without authority. Well, these are false foundations. These are false principles. And then you develop, the system of authority and the legal system based on that, which dictates to people what they can't do, that they are actually morally and principally, in truth, allowed to do, and then punish them for things that you say they're not allowed to do, but they actually are allowed to do. Or make them do things, force them to do things that are wrong, under penalty of hurting them more than if they comply. Principles as drives for behavior. The importance of principles. Principles can be taken into our inner selves as foundations. These might not be laws of nature, but they act as, quote, laws we bind ourselves to for our conduct or behavior when we adopt them into our thinking. Thought informs behavior. Ideas or concepts that we find value in are used as foundations to stand on, to direct our actions. And that's what the image at the bottom is. You know, a little stick figure is standing, and that's what those principles are driving behavior, because that's the foundation you're standing on. And you can have bullshit foundations, or you can have true foundations. And you have things that are arbitrary, but they're not too prudent. Principles act as a launch pad to leap into action from. It's important to not take in false beliefs as foundations. That's one of the definitions of principles, is that they can be a foundational assumption or belief. So then you believe in something, and that's what you base your actions upon and how you live. In ancient Egypt, Ma'at, as a concept represented by the goddess Ma'at, meant morality, truth, and justice. One of the symbols to represent Ma'at, or Ma'at, was a plinth, and that's what the foundation is. It's a plinth. Objective morality, moral truth, is the most important foundation to have in life. Always base your decisions and behavior from that base foundation of morality, law, love, agape. What's in your foundation that you use as footing to direct your actions? Do you know if it's true? Do you care? Is objective morality there? The law of gravity. It's a discovery from a fact to a principle to a law. So I like to use the law of gravity here just to show how we can relate observations, and from those observations and derive facts of what's happening in reality. Then we can build a principle around it and then go even further towards a law. So this is how a principle isn't a law. In the derivation, in the statement of the principle, it's not actually a law. And that's because, as I mentioned in the summary for a law, a law is immutable, it's binding, it's invariable, it's inherent. So you'll see here in the first derivation of the principle of gravity, you can see how it's not invariable. Because you note that an apple fell from this tree. So that's a fact. The apple fell. That happened in reality. It's a fact. It was in the tree and then it fell down. Why didn't it fall up? Why didn't it rise up? Why didn't it go sideways one way or the other? Why didn't it explode? Well, that's not the way reality works, right? So the apple fell from the tree. So then you recognize that, well, if you throw the apple up, it's going to come back down. If you throw a rock up, it's going to come back down. So then you derive a principle from that repetition, again, that regularity theory of something that regularly happens. It's a pattern. Well, what goes up must come down. You repeat the process and the same result happens, the same conditions of throwing a massy object up, and the result is that it comes back down. So that's a principle. What goes up must come down. It's a statement of a principle. It's not a principle as a law. The equivocation in the scientific field, where they call some things principles or they call them laws and they mean the same thing. This is really going from a fact towards a principle where what goes up must come down. And why this is not invariable is because you can go into outer space, which nullifies the statement because it isn't specific enough. It doesn't state the conditions when it applies or not, and that you have to be already in the presence of a gravitational force strong enough for attraction to occur in order for the force that you propel upwards is not strong enough to escape that gravitational force, so then it comes back down. So then we can get to the strength of gravity between any two objects, like the earth and an apple being thrown up, like an apple in the earth, depends on the masses of the objects and the distance between them. So this gets formalized as an equation of the force of gravity is proportional to the gravitational constant times mass 1 and mass 2 divided by the distance between them squared. And that's the law. So it was the law as a statement, which was more specific, and it's the law as an equation. So this describes the relationship or behavior between facts under certain conditions. So here we're getting more of an understanding of how this all works together and the definitions of how how it relates phenomena, so the relationship or relation of things in existence, and under certain conditions where things interact, there is a relationship of an interaction, and those conditions produce another condition. So in this case of gravity, a large enough mass and another mass, well, then you have gravity and there's an attraction. The physical laws are expressed through an equation that relates aspects of reality. The law of gravity has an equation that gives an approximate value for the force of gravity. It explains the relationships that produce the effect and occurrence of an apple falling to the ground. The law of gravity describes what happens with mass and distance to get gravity. The noticeable effect of gravity isn't present everywhere, but when large enough masses and certain relative distances are present, then the force of gravity visibly emerges. And if the distance is too large, like when you go into space, well, then you're not falling back down to Earth because you're not close enough. Again, specific conditions is what make it emerge and be visibly observable. So this is just a side bubble of Newton's law of universal gravitation is usually stated as in this wordy format of every particle attracts every other particle in the universe with a force that is directly proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between their centers. Why is there the law of gravity? Why is there gravity? How does gravity come about? What causes mass and distance to develop the emergence of gravity? Why does mass and distance produce gravity? The law of gravity humans came up with is describing the relationship of mass and distance. The actual interaction relationship of mass and distance themselves are why gravity manifests. Without mass, there is no gravity. If the masses are too far apart, there is no gravitational effect. But that still doesn't answer why mass and distance allow for the emergence of gravity. So we might not know why things work this way, just that it is this way. The law is how we make sense of how things relate and interact to produce additional effects that aren't present without the initial specific interacting conditions. Is the law akin to something itself in the background inner workings of the universe that takes input and produces output like a program does? It seems like it, not that it is that, not that it is a program, but it seems like it. What we've created in terms of programs and code, well, that like mimics the functionality of how the universe works. So we've recreated an analogous functionality to how you can also look at how the universe works. It can be corresponded. How we've created programming and code in computers, well, we can use that as an analogy to correspond to something else that we're trying to understand, which is the universe and how it works. So it looks like it has similar functionality to the way a program does, where it takes input and then in the background there's this thing called a law that processes it, and then there's the output. So there's the initial condition, the interaction relationship between things, and then once that is present, then it produces the output. Law reflects how the universe has functionality that allows and hence makes or controls how initial conditions produce the effect condition. This is a continuation of why is there the law of gravity, talking about this idea. An additional factor to gravity and the interaction of mass and distance is space-time curvature of general relativity. So that can help us understand more of how gravity comes about. It gives us more information, more of an understanding of how it happens. We don't know exactly why it is there in the first place or what makes it happen. Again, you can look at the law as what makes it happen, because there's like an input of an initial condition, specific certain conditions, and then there's a result, and those initial certain conditions are happening in reality as opposed to not happening. So there's something in reality that allows that to happen. So hence why It's looked at in the prescriptive theory, ontological view of laws of nature, as the necessitarian theory of being prescriptive is that it makes things happen, it controls, it governs how the initial conditions produce the effect condition. Because one's a cause, and then there's an effect. And in between, there's the processing of the universe, things in the universe that allow the functionality of the universe itself, those processes that allow that to happen in the first place, as opposed to the interaction happening and the result not happening, or a different result happening instead of how it currently works. So we have space-time curvature, and this was, I think, confirmed. It was theorized by Einstein and then confirmed when they looked at how light was bending around very massy objects, like I think it was black holes or planets or suns. So mass and energy, when you understand space-time curvature, go look into it. It's pretty interesting. There's like a dual relationship, how mass and energy tells space-time how to curve. So when there's mass and energy, it curves space-time. So as the light moves through, it curves around the object. And because there's that space-time that's curved, it also tells mass how to move. So mass and energy tells space-time how to curve, and space-time tells mass how to move. Because once there's that curvature in the space-time, that's how we're able to conceptualize it. Then things curve around it because of that sinkhole. When you look at the visualizations, that's the easiest way for us to comprehend it, is there's a flexible sheet, and you put a ball in it and it curves in. Well, when you put something else, you try to put it across, well, it'll go into that curve and then pop out. Anyways, it's really interesting to look into. But still, we're left at, well, why does mass create curves in space-time to pull things closer to the mass as it moves through space-time? Is a hypothetical graviton at the micro-quantum level of mass the reason? Why would quantum particles like quarks and leptons make a graviton exist, if it does at all? Does it all come from the underlying field, that unified field? Why does the field do this? There is a constant begging the question. It seems like an endless why and how. Does the chain of causality end? Can it regress? Can it ever be known? Maybe not. But that doesn't mean we can't hypothesize about it to try to figure it out. In the end, what matters is knowing that there is an effect, such as that we call gravity, and that it's caused by mass and distance, which are how the force of gravity increases or decreases. So what matters is knowing there's an effect. In all of our observations about how certain conditions produce certain effects, and then we can describe it through a principle and use statements, and then maybe an equation to quantify it more precisely. You know, we still have these questions, well, why does it work this way? Why is there this law? Why isn't there some other law? You know, what matters is that this is how it is, and knowing that there is this effect from this cause. And this is also what matters for the law of freedom, that there is freedom, that effect, or slavery, that effect of slavery, and that morality of behavior, the cause, is how freedom increases or decreases, which is to increase the amount of enslavement. That's what matters in understanding laws, not about why the laws are there, but just about that the laws reflect an understanding of the functionality of things in the universe. The principle or law of causality. Causes invariably precede effects. Effects equal what happens. Causes equal why effects happen. There is a relationship between cause and effect. Why does causality work that way? What caused causality to work like that? It seems impossible to answer with certainty and is also self-referential, implying it is omnipresent. So that's what laws are. And when we think about causality, what caused causality? Well, what whiteness made white? It's self-referential. What caused causality? Well, you're talking about the thing itself. You can't use it to explain itself. So in that respect, we can't answer why it's this way. It's just that way. It's a fundamental component of reality, a true axiom. And it's a principle or law that's a foundation before all others. Because if you're talking about gravity or inertia, we're talking about mass. We're talking about certain conditions, specific conditions being present, that then produce other conditions as a result. So we're talking about cause and effect. So cause and effect is fundamental to all the other laws. There's always cause and effect present. There's always something present, and because it's present, well, then we can understand laws or principles and create equations to represent those states, those conditions that are present as an effect. There's always causality. But some say causality is an assumption with no evidence or illusion, despite its obvious demonstrability. So I mentioned this before with the scientific method, if X then Y. The scientific process of experimentation of a hypothesis and repeatability of results necessitates that a condition-specific cause produces the same effects. So a specific condition will produce the same effects. That's if X, then Y. And that's how things work in programming. Under X conditions, you get Y results. This fundamental quality makes it a or the prime principle or law. That's how I view it. The principle or law before all other principles or laws that deal with more specific aspects of reality, for example, gravity or thermodynamics, etc. You can't have an effect without a preceding cause. In summary, principles are foundations, fundamentals. They help to recognize the existence of laws. They can be properties of laws or laws themselves. Laws, accurately enough, represent relationships, interactions, or, quote, behavior, quote, behavior in reality. And by behavior, I put it in quotes because, we're not talking about necessarily human behavior. In the scientific realm, behavior is anything that does something. So a rock rolling down a hill, well, that's behavior. Where was I? Laws accurately enough represent relationship, interactions, or behaviors in reality. So accurately enough. Maybe again, we're going to be off by 0.0000000000001% of how it actually works behind the scenes in reality, but it's good enough. Whatever. When we come up with things, sometimes they'll be poor and they need to be refined, but eventually we get a good enough representation in those equations that are derived through the observations of how things function in reality. So laws are fixed, invariable, inviolable, universal, always operate the same way given the same criteria or conditions. They reflect underlying functionality of the universe that prescribes certain conditions will produce certain results. Which are described by statements or equations. Alleged, quote, principles, such as, for example, authority is natural or that it's necessary, can be false and used to invent false, quote, laws, so-called laws, that violate rights or principles, that violate true principles. And therefore, they're used to justify immorality, to make something, quote, right that is actually wrong, or make something, quote, wrong that is actually a right. For example, the false principle that using alcohol or cannabis is immoral. Not objectively immoral, but subjectively immoral. and then creating laws to make it illegal or criminal to have or use. The legal law is not a true law. Putting things into your body conforms to the true principle of non-aggression and self-ownership. So this is how you can see how principles and laws that they come up with in the legal system and the criminal code, well, these are flawed because they're based on flawed foundations. They're not based on true principles such as non-aggression and self-ownership. Principles can possibly be violated. Law is inviolable. So that's where you have some principles as they're derived, like when I gave the example of gravity, when that statement, what goes up must come down. Well, it wasn't inviolable, so it can be violated. So some true principles can be ignored or violated. For example, what goes up must come down. The non-aggression principle or the self-defense principle, check out my previous presentations on that, on the natural law, the science of morality, part 1, part 3, and part 4. They deal with that more. So those principles can be adhered to or not. They can be violated because they're not a law of nature. They're a principle in nature, but they can be violated. Non-aggression principle is violated all around us. The self-defense principle is denied all around us. It's not enacted. The law of gravity can't be violated. Given specific conditions, it emerges or manifests. The law of gravity states, plus or minus mass and distance equals the amount of gravity present. The law of freedom can't be violated. See, it's an actual law of nature, whereas principles can be not laws. They are true, but they can be violated. So the law of freedom is inviolable. Results are based on conditions or causes present, which is the presence of moral behavior or not the presence of moral behavior. There is choice on how to behave. The law of freedom doesn't make, prescribe, or force us to do anything. It's only describing or prescribing that certain results will come about based on our choices. So you choose moral behavior, well, the more people that choose moral behavior and the more moral behavior there is, well, the more freedom we will have to potentially reach true freedom, and then the less enslavement there will be. And conversely, choose immoral behavior. So as I state here, the law of freedom states plus or minus aggregate moral or immoral behavior equals the amount of freedom or the amount of slavery that we end up getting. And causality is fundamental and can't be violated. You can't remove causality, cause and effect. It can't be violated. So that's why it's essentially a law. It can be viewed as a principle, like in philosophy and in reasoning, there's causality. You reason from cause to effect. And in physical laws, well, it's a law because there's cause and effect in how things occur. And that helps us reason about them to figure out what's happening. Causality underlies all laws, the law of gravity, the law of thermodynamics, the law of freedom, etc. Causality is a base descriptor for interactions in reality. Laws aren't the initial cause that makes certain conditions produce certain results. Those specific conditions are what make the results happen. So again, the law of gravity, well, it's mass and the distance between them and how large the mass is. Well, that's the initial cause that makes the result happen, because if those specific conditions aren't present, well, you're not going to get the result of gravity. It doesn't matter what the law is. If the conditions aren't there, you're not getting the result. You're not getting the effect. So one is an initial cause. And law represents what allows causal conditions to generate the resulting condition. A specific condition always leads to another, and a law reflects the process that leads to, controls, and governs what must happen. So thank you for your time and attention. Appreciate that you watch this. Hope you gain value, and there will be several more parts to come. This was a long presentation, so I decided to chop it up into different parts rather than make another 8 or 9-hour presentation. The last one, Natural Law, the Science of Morality, Part 4, Morality, it was 8 hours and it was long enough, super long. So I decided this time I'm going to do them in segments, and then maybe I'll add them all together and I'll do one big presentation at the end. It'll allow me to refine things even more, make improvements along the way. So thanks. Take care. Peace. All right, so my mic's not working apparently. I'm going to wait for the stream, try to figure this out. Oh, it's working this time. Okay. Great. Yeah. Thanks, Derek. Loud and clear. I don't know why it didn't work before. Maybe I had the mute on and I didn't notice. Normally I don't use that button. So yeah, thanks to everyone for joining in the chat. That was my first, pseudo live stream. It wasn't a live stream where I was just live and doing everything live. It was pre-recorded, obviously. And there was the chat with interaction. If you have any questions in the chat, you could have asked them. Some did. I provided some answers, and if people on the internet will debate everything yet. That's why this wasn't a physics presentation. I was just using some rudimentary examples to elucidate a comparison between how the law of freedom is actually a law. Because of it, once you can understand how we come up with our laws as representations. Hey, Brandon's there. All right. Give me a second. I gotta figure out how this works. All right. I'll go here. See, Brandon's not there yet, but he's coming soon. Hold on. Hopefully this works when I do it. I gotta put in the source. I'm doing everything manual, Video Ninja, no fancy. There we go. Does your audio work?
Yes, howdy, howdy. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I don't know if the stream. Let me see. All right, it's coming through on the stream. Super. Okay.
Sweet.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah,
thanks for coming aboard, Brandon. Good to see you.
yeah. I'll always show my support. I've always, considered you one of the greatest teachers, like hell on the planet. I followed your work, since what 2014. So, always a pleasure to be able to watch one of your presentations, which I'm actually quite shocked you created another presentation after, Funnel 4. Because you created a presentation for that too. So was actually quite surprised to see how the live stream show up 2 days ago. I was like, man, Chris is kind of on it to put out two presentations, already. So, much thankful for that. And then of course, like you're going like deeper into like, helmet helmet physics. And sadly, I think a lot of people are going to be lost, but I am highly, appreciative of it because one thing I learned from your work is to like always go deeper. Like that's kind of one thing that you and Michael Tsarion kind of share is like is how we can always go deeper and deeper and learn more and more and never really be settled at like where we are in our knowledge. So I'm like I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the kind words, and uh, was it? Funnel 4, Humanity Rising, Inspiring Care to Action, that just happened, and this presentation. Well, it's been in the works. Like I had this idea of doing the natural law, the science of morality, in the summer of 2022, and then I did like part 1, 2, 3 really quickly in 2023, and then did seed 5, and then It took me a year, yeah, to do the morality one because I'd take time off and then take a break and then come back to it, and it was just a lot of stuff in that one. That one was the 8 hour one, which you you said you watched it in one sitting, so I found that pretty impressive there. But
Yeah, yeah. Hell, I've actually watched it twice, and I'm pretty sure I'm kind of like you. Like, I don't care how long a fucking video is. If I find knowledge in it, then I'll, like, I'll find the time to watch it. So, and I'm pretty sure you're kind of, the same way. And yeah, I did enjoy that presentation too, as well. And I learned a lot from it too.
great. Well, I hope whoever watches it, whoever can stand listening to something for that long or in segments.
Oh, one thing I wanted to let you know is you, out of all the people, as far as work on my live stream, your material gets the most views on Rumble. Yep. Like, yeah, all of your videos get more views than everybody else. So
Maybe
at
that's
least
just
there's,
a coincidence. People too, they happen to play like after work, and then people have time to tune in or something.
well, your slides are very well known in this community, because I've seen your slides, be used on other big time, creators,
Oh yeah,
channels.
oh, I
Yeah.
didn't
And I
know.
doubt they don't. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, like I've seen some of your slides used on people, that has hundreds of thousands of subscribers and gets millions of views. And I don't even think they are familiar with your work. And that's very sad.
Yeah, well, at least they got some benefit and appreciation of the images they probably found on Google Images searches. I guess that's where you can find a lot of the trivium stuff there.
Yeah.
It turns up pretty high in the first few pages. Yeah. So yeah, and then I worked on this one. I was gonna do the law of freedom before morality, and then I realized, well, no, the morality is part of the definition of the law of freedom. So then I switched. I'm like, well, I got to do morality first because that was my whole thing. How do you define freedom? Well, you got to define slavery because it's the absence of slavery. And then how do you define slavery? We got to do rights. That's why I did rights, then slavery, then true freedom. And I was going to do the law of freedom. And then I realized, oh shit, right? Morality is part of the definition, so I got to define that first. And then, yeah, I got into a whole boatload of a long, long mess. I ended up with whatever 130 or something. So I forgot how many there were, but yeah, it was a lot. And yeah, then an 8 hour presentation, my first one to ever be that long. So less people will watch it, but maybe this way, with the Law of Freedom one, get some more people to be able to want to look at something that's an hour long in different parts, and then maybe I'll do a fresh version with like all the slides together because it was turning out to be huge. I think there's more slides than in the morality presentation, so that's why I was like,
Wow.
and I keep working on it, and I'm like, it's so like big to just go in all my images and try to like, okay, this goes here and try to reorder it. So I'm like, okay, the first part's been done for a while, so I'm just gonna put it out and then I'll just do section by section. It'll be a lot easier than trying to jumble everything all together and put it in sequence. And that would probably go to another presentation at the end of April or in May or something. So this way, get some more content coming out quicker, I guess.
Sweet, sweet. He'll definitely, he'll stay tuned in.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you.
Is is Derek in the
Oh shit! Thanks for.
yeah.
Oh shit. Yeah, let me know in the chat, Derek, because it's in another window, and yeah. So
Yeah.
all right, we gotta. I had pre-planned for at least two, so if anyone else comes, I'll have to add another source.
Video Ninja is kind of like tricky to use. It's like it's different than some of the other, like platforms as far as like hosting people. But it's like once you get used to it, it kind of becomes, yeah, like
How come I
it's pretty
can't
nice.
move?
Oh no, I'm covering you.
Where's mine? Oh,
How's it
there
going,
you are.
gentlemen?
Right. Okay,
Nice.
it all worked out. Sweet. All right, thanks for popping in.
Yeah,
I'm a
definitely.
noob at this. It's my first time doing live streaming. Plus, I'm not using the easy software of Restream or StreamYard. I'm going hard mode on my first time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's all to the good. And I got to ask you real quick, because were you inspired after the last Europa Natural Law conference? Because you did a quick little live stream test after a chat with Anarchy.
No, well, I had already planned. I decided this like
Okay.
last week that
Word, right on, right on.
I was
It
like,
just
yeah, go ahead.
it just popped in really synchronistically, I guess, because I kind of mentioned the law of freedom really briefly in that chat, and then boom, you were just talking about that exact thing right after. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, great presentation, by the way. Yeah, as
thanks.
always, brother. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was just laying the foundations to get people to really understand. Like, I hardly talked about the law of freedom apart from the first slide, and then it was really to understand, well, what makes something a law. That's what I had to. That's what I went into this. Like when I mentioned in like the second slide, well, I thought about it a lot because I questioned, well, is the law of freedom actually a law? Well, what makes it a law? I had to go looking into that and figuring it out, and so that's why I wanted to present it so that people can really understand and like, oh, that's just some mumbo jumbo spiritual nonsense or whatever. And well, no, it's like what makes a law. Well, everyone understands gravity, right? You're not floating off into space on the Earth, so how does that happen? So you can. I like that one because it directly relates. It has an equation and it has the initial causes, which are mass and the distance between them, so how big the mass is, and that's how law of freedom is comparable because you have the behavior, and that's the initial cause that leads to the resulting effect. And so it was very relatable. So it makes it a basis that people can relate to and understand the law of freedom better. I have I think 4 more slides that relate the law of freedom and gravity. And like I have different sections. Some are bigger than others. Some are like 30 slides. Some are that one's just like 4 slides. But that'll be coming up maybe in the next one. I'll get to that point. And I'll just answer. Alex PM asked the question. I'll show it again, but I showed it a while ago. How old was I when I made the Trivium videos? Maybe 10 years ago or something. So I'm 41 now. And the first set of Trivium videos were Language and Reality series, where I had the Trivium in there. And that one was 2014. And then I made like other stuff, philosophical metaphysics. That's the foundation of the Trivium. That was based on Sister Miriam Joseph's book. That one came shortly after, and that one I think was 2014 or 2015, early 2015. I don't remember. So it's been 10, 11 years. And my major graphics uniting the Trinity of Consciousness with the Trivium in that sequence of events from thought to, well, knowledge, input to thought, to understanding, to emotion, to wisdom output, and then as action. That one was the beginning of 2014, taking a lot of stuff from Passio and mashing it together into a visual representation.
Yeah, and I just got to say real quick, your slides, going back to that, like they can be so informationally dense, and yeah, like I think I recall, yeah, watching some of your presentations, yeah, from like even a decade ago, and you could be just a 20-minute block just on one slide, just because there's so much to talk about, like, and yeah, like even we could go on for an hour or so just on like one slide, because there's so much. And you yeah you have a really brilliant way of conveying information and concepts as well. And so yeah, man, hats off to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
41 going on 21. Is that what you said?
What?
41 going on 21.
Is that what I
Because
said?
when I shave, like I have a baby face, but Chris,
Oh,
like you
yeah,
literally,
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah,
If I
yeah,
shave, like, I don't, I have
yeah,
like like a Keanu Reeves type of thing. I don't know in his early days, but I guess he's in his
Yeah,
50s now. But yeah, if I
yeah,
shave, I look like a teenager or something.
yeah.
I'm
You got the
aging
baby face.
gracefully very well. Positive or negative, oh, you don't look older. People want to look older. Well, I've always looked like young, and I guess it's beneficial in my old age. I'll be a 50-year-old teenager or something.
Proof of living in alignment to natural law and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's the the non-carnist vegan plant eating. Maybe that helps.
Yeah.
Whether it actually makes you live longer or not isn't the reason I did it. So people can argue this science or that science, and either way they want to argue it. But I just go based on principles, foundational principles to live by, rather than the science that says this and then someone's got counter science. So I think the science for the plants as being very beneficial for health is pretty strong, but people can just bring up other stuff and just counter it and disregard everything you're saying. So I think the moral foundation is more rock solid. That is, if people have the care developed to actually care to let go of their ego calcification, to actually look at it objectively and see, like, oh, do animals matter morally at all? Do they not matter at all? So let's just go walk around kicking dogs and cats everywhere? Well, no. So then they do matter morally. So then you just need to develop that more and think about it more, and then align your behaviors with what you realize is true. And that's a process that people don't really want to engage in, that shadow work, that part of the shadow work, especially when you look at yourself and your behaviors and what your behaviors are doing. Well, that's what people don't really want to look at, is how they're doing something wrong, because they just want to believe everything's good with however they do anything, and they can just keep doing it because that's just a perception versus the reality of, well, is it good, is it wrong, or is it right?
One thing that you talked about was um true principles versus false principles. And I was thinking of the term proxy principles, PP. But one thing that I've encountered, when you are trying to, to talk with people and you are trying to explain them about, objective morality, and you bring up that word principles, and then of course, how you can define it, like the first thing, first foremost, the base layer, how the foundation. And then once this individual starts talking, or the person, how you're talking to, and you kind of compare principles that I have, versus their principles. And that's, I think, when you can see kind of the distinction is, we're operating, or, like, we're talking about true principles, and they are, of course, talking about proxy principles, PP. So I'm glad you had brought that up, because I had never really, like, thought about it too, like too much. But can you really build off of proxy principles? Like, can you really build off of, false principles? Because I would say you can't. So I'm glad you brought that up. And of course, I'm going to have to watch this presentation, a couple of times, because, you're talking about, like, deeper, like, concepts in metaphysics, kind of, possibly going to lose a lot of people, but, fuck it, so be it. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because, now when I'm, incorporating these things, of course, learning from other people, to, add these tools into my resume to try to, spread this knowledge, and, try to help inspire others. That's something that I can, possibly, help look at too, to try to explain the differentials and principles, because, like, a lot of people will put, like, making the most money as one of the core principles. Well, then, okay, well, what does that lead to? Then you start doing immoral things to try to get that money. So is that truly a real principle? No, it's not. So it just gets back, like to what you was really talking about. And then you had the whole, law can be equated with principle, and, like, just a phenomenal, her presentation that I'm really gonna have to go back and watch again. Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because like I've always said, you will possibly be the one person who could take Mark Passio's work and actually build on top of it. That's something that I hope that I can do, one day, and I hope many others, can build upon your work. Because that's what we are all trying, or we all should be doing is learning from others and trying to add to the conversation and build help upon their greatness by adding our own greatness. Like that's what all the great teachers and philosophers and like the great wise sages, did. And I'm very, thankful for that. But yeah, you are like the one pioneer who I know of. And if there are any other people out there, please send their name my way because I would love to learn from them and go deeper in my knowledge and understanding because there's still so much to learn. And Chris, like I honestly think that you are like you are at the forefront of trying to go deeper and to convey these concepts out because on Tuesday we had a question asked by Rick, and it was kind of a more like if we was to have a true society based on natural law, and like he asks a good question, that hopefully one day will need to be answered. And Chris, you talked about in your early presentations how if a wrong is done, of course we talk about responsibility, and good moral individuals should be able to stand and take that more responsibility in the now. Well, Rick's question was like, well, what happens if there is a violent, murder, in a free society, and there's nobody there, to rectify the situation? Then 6 months pass, like then he's getting into, like consequences and repercussions, like which you covered in your work. But it's like those are some good questions that should be asked, hell, of course, so we can have great minds, um, try to answer that question. But it's like I told Derek and Rick, I'm like, man, we are so far from even being close to that because we can't get people to understand these basic concepts. And when it comes to, like how, steps B, C, and D, we can't really get to that because we haven't gotten to step A of these simple concepts. So we can't, like get to these later, like deeper things that we should be talking about when it comes to building communities, based on a natural law and how we can go about, truly rectifying wrong behavior and, all of what that's going to take. But hell, of course, what I said was, it comes down to the now and being able to be responsible in the now. And the longer time is put in between that wrong action, then the more problems you are going to, have, can occur. So it's just those kind of questions, of course, like which your work has answered before. We need more great thinkers like that to, to be able to help us get to where we say we want to go, because yeah, even if we understand, natural law, and if more people did, then you have to go into the steps about actually building true communities, in the world based in freedom. And that's what we're all trying to aspire to. But until we get through those baby steps of people actually learning, this basic knowledge, we are so far from that. And it's sad.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the kind words as usual. I know you appreciate my work. You're probably one of the person who appreciates it the most out of the few people who know of my work. So I always appreciate your kind words and appreciation. It's good to have feedback, and makes you realize that some people are getting it and some people gain value from it. So that's good because it's hard. Like a lot of people might create content, and if you get no feedback, then it's like no one's. You don't. Like you might. Someone might think, "What are they doing it for?" But I didn't have much feedback when I started, so don't let that stop you. I put it all out and did a lot of work, and then years later, people come across it, and then if you put it out there, then people can gain value from it, even if you never hear from them. You might never know the impact you have on someone's journey and on the path of truth to gaining more truth and self-actualization towards moral truth. But if you never put it out there, then well, it's for sure that no one's going to be impacted by your work because you just never put it out there. So And yeah, all these, the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z. What steps are you at? Well, the first step is always, you need that moral truth, or else you're not going to get anywhere. And whatever happens, it's what's happening now and what happens then is all going to be based on what I've come up with. It might be a lame term. I call it the principle of quantity. I've mentioned it on the Europa Natural Law a few times. So it sounds like, what, quantity? That's not a principle. That's just like a property. Like if you look at an equation, well, there's quantity in the equation, so that's just a property or a part of the equation, but it's not a principle. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the aspect of numbers. Numbers matter, and it doesn't matter where you are, because a democracy is just whatever, the supposed rule by the majority, even though we're not ruling. It's just you're tricked into voting for someone every 4 years to be a master or ruler, and you perpetuate the plantation going on with just a different plantation manager every few years, and then it just keeps repeating. But the quantity is what determines what happens. So if a bunch of people right now, we're letting what it is now be what it is, and if people have moral knowledge and are ready to actualize it in a quantitative manner, hence the principle of quantity, then that will reflect what that area is, whether it's a small town or a big town or a big city or a state or province or a country or the planet. Well, it's all going to start where those people are at. So it always requires a quantity. So if everyone's like, well, let's just put, if someone breaks the law, then you can take them and put them in chains, and well, that's what it's going to be, and that's what it was in the past. You look at the movie Gladiator, whatever, fictional representation or whatever, but the guy was part of the elite, and then he got framed for a murder or something, and then I don't know if he was framed, but anyways, he went back home, and then he was just like kidnapped, and oh, well, now you're a slave. We just decided all of a sudden, well, you're just a slave because we got more weapons than you, so now you're a slave, and everyone just accepts it. Well, that's if everyone accepts it, then that's the way it is. If powerful people can just go around kidnapping other people and then put them in to work or to fight for their own gains, then that's what the society will reflect. And that's what it is everywhere. So the only thing it comes down to is, well, what is everyone agreeing to do or to allow in the aggregate? Are they allowing immoral things, or are they going to not allow immoral things and make sure morality is what prevails? So it's all based on the principle of quantity. Anyways, I don't know. That's the term I'm coming up with, because it's all based on quantity. But there might be a principle of numbers is another way I've referred to it. But and another thing you mentioned on building up on other people's work. Well, that's what my purpose was when I started my work, because Mark Passio was an inspiration for all of us. He's he has referred to himself as the person who's put out the most work on natural law, and that's true. And he's put, like, I forget how he said it, but it's similar to what I've said before I even heard him say it. Because one day I was listening to like the podcasts, and I was just thinking, like, he might have said something about psychology, and psychologists have told him that he's told them more about some workings of psychology than they've learned in their education. And I was like thinking, like, oh yeah, and then the people are like into Jordan Peterson, who's a psychologist in Canada, or was. I don't remember what the situation happened with him there. He had to go for sensitivity training or whatever issued by the authorities of the psychology college or whatever. Anyways, I was like, oh, some people would listen to him for psychology, and I'd be like, yeah, but Passio understands psychology better, because he's getting at things that even Peterson doesn't even touch and doesn't even comprehend. And I'm like, it doesn't matter how many books you can reference on something. You can reference 1,000 or 1,000,000 books. You could come out with something that no one's referenced. So it doesn't matter if you've studied Heidegger or Schopenhauer or Hegel or that crazy German guy there. Anyways, I forget his name. I forget all the names. I haven't
Nietzsche.
studied much of them. What?
Nietzsche's.
Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that guy.
Yeah, Friedrich
So
Nietzsche.
like
Yeah.
people think you like, oh, you don't know much about philosophy or this or that because you haven't read all these works of the past. But so what does that matter? Are they talking about morality and actually getting to the definition of the most important thing that anyone can know? No, okay. I'm not saying they don't have any valid work, but I'm saying you could read all the shit on philosophy over all of human history and read 1,000 books, and you're still not going to gain the value that's missing if you're not going through Mark Passio's work. So I've regarded Mark Passio's work as the single greatest source of information that anyone can go through on this planet that has ever been created to date. The single greatest source. So I'm trying to build on top of that. And as I created content at the outset, my goal was to go deeper into certain things. So he'd explain it to a certain extent, and then I wanted to understand it more. And so I try to dig into it more and then explain that in a deeper sense. And that's what people who I used to talk to at the time who have said about my work. They're like, wow, your work is like Passio's, but you're just going deeper into it. And yeah, that was my goal, is to, because he's already explained it. And that brings up another aspect of the importance of being a repeater, of being a broken record. So I think there's a lot
Yeah.
of aversion in people doing the great work of getting people to accept moral truth. So that can be many things, like teaching about psychology and the shadow work and cognitive biases and logical fallacy and how to think and how to learn. That'll all help towards being able to accept what moral truth is and learning what moral truth is. But then the end goal is always the moral truth, and that's to end immorality, to end slavery, to end evil. And that's what I based my morality presentation upon, and that's how I derived those two levels of morality, was based on creating evil or ending evil. And then the second layer was, well, you're participating in it. So you're not creating it, but you're participating. If you're participating in it, you're creating it. And the second level is tolerating it. So you're not creating or participating in it, but because you're tolerating it, then you're not working to that ultimate goal of ending evil. So it's the second level of immorality. And I forget where I was going with this, but I jumped onto the morality presentation and I lost my train of thought.
You're talking about taking Passio's work further and all that.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
I forget. Sorry, guys.
No worries.
What did you laugh at, Brandon? You laughed at something, and I think that's what I was going off of. My point. You, like 2 minutes ago, you laughed, and that's where I was going.
Honestly, yeah, like my brain's kind of all over the place. I'm tired. I got a bunch of shiny technology, blinding me and
Okay.
shit, like 5 damn screens. So like my mind's all over the place.
No problem.
Sorry, Derek, here you can go.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Let's take it back to the quanta aspects real quick, because it's like human beings are so powerful, and we underestimate how powerful we can be, and how quick perceptions can change, I think, as well. And I'm thinking about the what's up, Fred Libricasto? Fuck, I thought he was going live earlier, but anyways, y'all understand the 100th monkey effect, right? And all this, and taking it from the microcosm to the macro, and kind of like a quantum leap type of thing, where someone using, like, we're talking about principles, right? The Hermetica, mentalism, and then the correspondence that follows, right? So if people on the individual level really get their mind right and act upon that, with that heart-based intelligence, right? And it could catch fire in these, like grassroots type of community type grass fires. I forget the word. Excusez-moi, my French. Yeah, it's kind of late for me as well over here, but yeah, it's just, I feel like there are ways for people to just have these aha moments with just it's like it's so simple sometimes with the basic things that we're talking about, and it sucks that it seems like just such self-evident, overwhelmingly obvious information here, right? But it's the human spirit has been totally conditioned out of that with that, the inversions and perversions with the whole satanic divide and conquer crap, right? But yeah, if we continue to have that quality food of thought, I think we will. Yeah, it's like Chris, it's like being aligned to natural law. It's kind of like the awakening process of that is going through the youthing process as well, I feel, because you're just operating on more quality food of thought first and foremost, and like not everyone's even close to being a breatharian, but I feel like if we're on that path, we could possibly get there. But yeah. Maybe not even in this lifetime, but shit,
Yeah, it's definitely a multi-generational effort to get to that goal that
but the goal is just to cause the least amount of harm as possible, right? So for anyone out there, to whatever capacity, whatever, bodily makeup and blood type y'all got, it's like work with that and, continue to, go through these, bio-spiritual regenesises, if you will. Yeah.
least harm possible. That's the sacred feminine. Do no harm doesn't mean that like people take it too literally and like it's impossible to do no harm. Blah, this is bullshit. Why would you even adopt that philosophy, that principle? Well, it's not about literally doing no harm. It's about as a goal, just like the goal of self-improvement, betterment, being better than you were yesterday and working on yourself and trying to be better, do things better. Well, it's not
Yep.
about being perfect. That's the do no harm is the equation. It's equated to like perfection. Well, you're not going to reach perfection. It's just like it's an ideal to strive towards. You're never going to reach it. Well, do no harm isn't like never do any harm. Well, it's impossible. We go out, we drive. You're gonna walk on an ant or whatever. So things happen. So the point is in your efforts and what you try to do is you try to recognize how the things you are doing can be improved upon, even though you're not going to be perfect, and you can improve upon not doing harm, even though you're never going to do no harm, but that's the goal, the ideal goal.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
like the mind state, right? Yeah, Brandon, go for it.
What y'all are talking about, I got into a conversation with a friend, hell about that because I was trying to get him to understand about taking the high road, and he was like, "So in every situation, you were supposed to take the high road." And in 99.99% of situations, if your life is under, threat, violence, then no, you use self-defense. But yeah, in all other cases, then yeah, you choose the high road, like you choose to do what's moral. So then, of course, people's mindset goes straight to religion, you know, and like all of the, have the religious teachers. So then, it's like, well, you're not perfect. You can't be like this person. It's like it's not trying to be perfect. It's not about perfection. It's about the realization. It's about the awareness of right and wrong first, then making the conscious moral choice. You're not going to be successful in doing that all the time. Yeah, like there's going to be times, how where you fail. How there's going to be times, where you falter. That how there's going to be times where you may be successful. But you're honest about that, and you don't lie about it, and you learn from it. That's what it's all about. It's getting better, being better than you was. Like Chris said the day before, and that's really what it's all about. But yeah, like when you start talking about how being moral, people's mindset automatically go toward how Jesus or like all of these other teachers, because that's what they kind of how equate it to. and that's kind of like what they have been conditioned. So when they see someone truly trying to teach morality, like that's exactly where they go to, and it's like, no, it's not the same. you know and then Chris, one last question: why the color purple?
Um, well, that's based on my, like I mentioned in the Funnel 4 conference. I think it was image 3. Well, excluding the title card, so I guess it'd be image 4, somewhere around there. Um, Spectrum of Living. That was just to briefly mention. I'll get back to that, but I started when I was 30 by coincidence. That's like supposedly the age of enlightenment or whatever. And I look back at then, and I don't know what it was, but like I recognize that like I came up with some fucking original shit. Oh yeah, that's okay. Spectrum of Living, we'll get back to that. And that's what I wanted to talk about before was I just remembered the aversion we have in the great work that people do not want to repeat what other people said. This is what I'm noticing, is that what's the most important thing? Moral truth. So moral truth and getting to that's the great work, right? So everyone's already talked about it, pretty much. You can maybe find some new things to talk about, like I try to do, but maybe someone has already talked about that before. I'm just not aware of it. So like this whole thing of nothing new under the sun. And what I tried to do early on was I was trying to find, so this ties into what you just brought up, and that's why it triggered my memory, because I was trying to find new things. I was trying to bring novelty. And I think that's a hindrance that people can have in doing the great work, because they're like, oh, well, I can't think of anything new, and someone's already said it. Like, it's been said in the, maybe it was the One Great Work Warriors, or when there were roundtables, people mention, oh, well, I did this presentation, but then I didn't release it because you guys already talked about it, or something like that. And even in regards to natural law, oh, well, Passio's talked about natural law. He's done the most work on it, so I'm just going to be repeating what they say. But that's what is needed, is the repetition, is being the broken record, is being, that broken record. I'm going to bring Fred in and try to talk while I think of this. But the whole point of that was because the spectrum of living, when I was 30, getting into this, like I was technically 29 for 1 month before I turned 30 in the January of 2014. So I started my site at the end. But I wasn't really doing work, so I started just doing articles of like Passio's present material, because it needed to get out there. It wasn't out there in text mode. And so I wanted to... Oh, whoa, he's taking over.
Yo, Fred.
Yeah, I wanted
Hey, what's up, Fred?
I was trying to like just create new content, right? That was my focus. I wanted to do something new. So that's what I'm thinking back of. I keep thinking back of when I was 30, and like I came up with some original stuff, like the Trinity of Consciousness with the Trivium, fusing that together. No, I hadn't seen anyone do that before. I fused that together, made an awesome infographic. I made the natural law, alchemical distillation, putting that into like a visual mode to put that teaching all together. There was the spectrum of living was another way to do that. And that's why, getting back to what you said, Brandon, see, it's all coming back. I didn't forget this time, is the magenta. So in the spectrum of living, there's it's fusioning the RGB and the CMYK color modes in computers, so red, green, blue, and the cyan, magenta, yellow in the color wheel, so you see the full color spectrum, and then it associates it with different concepts of, so juxtaposing matter and spirit, and then the consciousness, human consciousness, the self in between, and You have negative qualities of apathy and all those failures, and then the higher qualities of moral alignment. And then at the bottom, where the magenta was, that's where I had natural law as the boundary. So that's where that color comes from, and that's where I used. So if you go through the spectrum of living and then you go back to the Funnel 4 presentation, you'll see everywhere that I use the colors, it's based on that spectrum of living color coordination model that I made, So
Right, right.
that's where it comes from.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense because I remember in your spectrum of living one, I think you talked about the colors, and that's when I realized, like, man, this, like this dude knows his computers. Because when you talk, I'm like, when you start talking about, like colors you find on a screen, then yeah, this person knows about computers because colors are important, especially when it comes to creating our presentations. You got to pick your colors wisely.
Yeah. What's up, Fred?
Hey, bonsoir. Bonsoir, messieurs.
Oh, wait. Okay, sorry. There's one more setting I forgot. Remember, this is, I'm a noob. This is my first time. Okay, it should work now.
Bonsoir, messieurs.
There you go. Hey.
How you doing, guys?
All right.
Hey,
Yeah.
what's up,
Hope
Fred?
you're doing great, man. I happened to take a hiatus on the podcast for a few months. I needed to put my attention in, somewhere else. And in this case, it's my family. I have a big family, so I'm very, very busy. Hard day at work from time to time, but I don't have anything to complain about. I'm very well. I don't miss anything, and one of the things that I wanted to bring is this scarcity mind control thing. I know there's a tendency that I want to point out in the future is the victimization aspect, and this one is very heavy, and it's in a whole can of worm in this case. And I was talking about morality and good and right and wrong on the French tonight before I come here. I was talking about it in French, and I was telling people, like you said earlier, violence is real, and violence can be a lot of different things, and we have learned to tolerate all kinds of violence, all sorts of violence, and we're not reacting to it, and that makes us an immoral being. And when you realize these things, and those are my understanding through shadow working. I had to look at myself first and confront myself about these certain things, and your perception about yourself and your perception about the world will change when you align with natural law and you understand this gift that we have, that is intuition. I call it our sixth sense. This is our compass there. We know when we're doing something bad. Everybody do. If you have this feeling inside of you. So what I brought up, and I don't want to get too much out of what you were talking about, and I was talking about the death of imagination and the consequences that are attached to it. I kind of pound this information, this stuff on the French side, because there we have a lot of problems there, and one of this problem is in ignorance and complacence, and it's very destructive for the people who know what I'm talking about. Ignorance is the root of all evil. Literally, I took this statement quite literally. I can see ignorance everywhere, and the ignorance of these facts that about natural law and psychology. This is evil, This is pure evil, because all the rights of the people are violated in the way, in the work, in this work, at least. What do
Yeah.
you think? What do you think, people, about that?
I wouldn't say it's pure evil, but it's part of that equation of how evil manifests. Because, well, as I mentioned, the principle of quantity. If
Yes,
everyone just lets it happen, well, then that's what happens. And is it
yes,
going to go
it's
away? Well, it's not going to go away because we just
yeah,
keep letting it happen. And that's
yeah,
why morality is
critical
so
masses.
important. You're not going to
Yeah,
have the moral unison of people acting together to combat that if
yeah,
people don't even know what morality is, because you can't do something unless you know how to do it. So if you're trying to create a moral world, well, you can't do it unless you know how, and that requires morality. It's like riding a bike or building a boat.
hmm
You're going to build a boat, well, you need the knowledge to do the result, and the result that people say they want is a good world, but they don't even know how to create it. And that's why Mark is so fucking frustrated, because I think he takes it a little too personally. Like, you know, the world hasn't changed. Yeah, in the aggregate, it hasn't. But look at all of us; we've been changed. So there is a small impact, and you're not one person putting out work isn't going to change the whole world, because that's never how it
sure.
has ever worked, and that's never how it's going to work. So it's not a realistic expectation that if you devote yourself to the great work entirely and don't do anything else or whatever, that
We can still fucking try to
yeah,
dug out of this shit, you know, trying
but
to
if we don't try, then
take a
it'll never
peek,
happen.
take a peek outside of the fucking pile of garbage. That we I understand Mark's reaction and the way that he's reacting. I feel this frustration too, man. It's very hard to be conscious. It's a heavy weight on your shoulders, because we're living in this immorality, and we're constantly trying to confront it, and not committing violence ourselves. Stopping violence means that sometimes you have to go farther, a little bit harder, to stop this violence, you know and when I'm talking about violence, essentially I'm talking about psychological violence and emotional violence. This is the priesthood of mind control and solipsism and moral relativism. This is implanted into the culture. I know you guys know all about this, but it's very important to remember ourselves that we are part of this machine. We're the clogs of it.
That's why
So
you got to do this type of stuff. Maybe not a live stream, but write some
as
articles, write a book, do something, and then you're countering. That's what I explained in my morality presentation. Is that if you're not, um, even if you're not participating in the creation of evil, you could still be doing immorality level 2, which is tolerating it. So we all are part of that toleration because we're one individual or four people, for example, versus 7 or 8 billion. Well, we're not going to make the world change by our physical actions. It requires other people to morally unite, and then things can actually change, because that's the whole principle of quantity thing that I mentioned that I came up with. And so to offset even though we do participate in it too, because of our the taxes and whatever way we pay them, everyone pays the sales tax. So we're all participating in this machine as much as we try not to. And the only way to counter that level, even that level of participation that we don't do voluntarily, but we do as part of our existence in the current way that the principle of quantity works out, with everyone agreeing that, well, we're just going to live this way. The way to counter that is to do the great work, is to do M2, morality level 2. And that's the highest level of morality. And if you're not doing that, then you're not countering your participation, and you're still engaging in immorality level 2, which is to tolerate it and not doing anything about trying to end evil.
Yeah, your work is incredible, man. I keep on repeating it. I fucking like it.
Thanks.
Your presentation, and I told you earlier, when we were talking, that your slides are awesome, man. I like it. It's very concise, man. Very easy to understand. It's a lot of stuff when you start from nothing, but when you have the basics, it's very, very concise, very clear, man. I like it.
Yeah, like Derek mentioned, you can spend hours talking about, like, for example, the circle of life or the egg of life one, because there's so much in there, but then you can go deeper and deeper into each one and explain a lot about it.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and I think some of these decent freedom fighter advocates could really benefit a lot, because what was going through my mind thinking about what you guys are talking about, yeah, like to get a large number of people to really have some kind of effect. And I spoke with the gentleman, Fred. I think, yeah, it was that guy, Steve. You had him on your show as well, one on one, and he was talking about how, well, if we could get, just like our this whole region of people to drive their cars without license plates and that kind of stuff, and start a movement like that, and maybe that could spawn other things and this and that. Like, yeah, it's not a bad idea. Yet, like, are these people with their without the driver's license? I mean, yeah, like, so that it's only going to work if a certain quantity does it. Otherwise, it's like fish in a bucket for police officers to, there's just like a couple people, easy targets, right? But are these people, moral people in general? Do they understand these natural law principles and that kind of stuff to even like get to this equation of freedom, right? Because we need that moral collective to, tip the scales towards freedom in that sense. So yeah, I find that, yeah, there's this contrast of all these freedom advocates, yet people have certain pieces to the puzzle, maybe higher quantity than others. Some of the pieces of the puzzle got little chips and are distorted or tainted or whatever. And but who actually has a decent image of what the actual picture looks like, so we know where these pieces of the puzzle actually fit in and go, right? Things to consider.
There's too much noise for sure.
That's why we gotta amplify the voice of truth by putting out
Oh
the
yes.
content, even though it's like a drop in the bucket. That's one of the analogies in one of my slides to explain the principle of quantity. Is if you have a big bucket of red paint and you put one tiny blue drop, well, it's still pretty much a red bucket, and you can look at that as freedom. Well, if the freedom is the natural state where you have a blue bucket and you put one red drop, well, the bucket is pretty much blue, right? But it's not true blue because there's red mixed into it. So it's not true freedom. As soon as you have immorality, you're robbed of true freedom. That original state is degraded, and then we need to do the work to restore it. So it could be temporary, and then it technically restores itself, but then there's the aspect of defense and getting justice and the repayment of a debt for something that was stolen. But when it's persisted as persistent enslavement, then you have that red is just there permanently. So you're not having that true blue. That true freedom is gone until that persistent enslavement is removed. And right now we have a lot of red, and the blue is pretty faded, and it's turned into like purple, if not going into like towards the red even more, because mix red and blue, you get purple in when you mix paints. So yeah, we got a lot of work, and that's why you gotta do articles or write a book or do a video or do audio, do a podcast, put the information about either morality, natural law, or how to get to it, to get people to eventually get to that, to accept it. And that's how we're going to combat all the garbage out there and all the propaganda is we got to be that counterforce. The voice of the lie is very strong, and we need more voices of truth being spoken into existence.
Yeah. And I would like to add that let me tell you something. We're almost alone. From what I saw in Quebec and the people around,
Or in the world.
or in the world, this is a tiny, 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 tiny part of what needs to be done. We're not even fucking scratching the surface of something. When we have to be realistic and bold about it. We have to fucking fight and go through the foliage and make your own way. And it's not easy. Because I on my side it's okay. I mean, I don't have bad people and people sending me like crap message and things like that. It's very respectful, but it's very, very limited. Even if I cover 2 languages, it's very limited for the importance of the information. It's rather sad, depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because our information is just being drowned out by all the lies, and like that's the problem. Is is we can do a podcast like every freaking week, something like this freaking weekly, but you got you know the propaganda machine putting out hundreds of thousands of videos each week compared to what's actually coming out, about how natural law, about shadow work, about hell occultism. So we need more hands on deck. And even if you don't want to be like in a video, you can do stuff behind the scenes. You can donate. There's people, who need video editors. There's people, who need people to bring people into live stream, to manage the chat. There's something that you can do to help assist. How maybe you're good at, bringing people together. How maybe that's what you may be good in. How that's what your craft is. How maybe you have, like organizational skills. What can you bring to the table? It may not necessarily be, creating content, but can you do something behind the scenes? If not, how can you donate to the ones who are trying to, get better equipment to try to put this information, out there? Because that right there in and of itself can be a task. You got to have, hardware. You got to have microphones. You got to, have lights and stuff, to do it, have the correct way. You got to have a good, a laptop, a good desktop, good audio. So there are plenty of people who can possibly help do stuff behind the scenes and, just help kind of manage things, to where you may not have to be on camera, but you're still at least lending an effort. You are still getting involved. You're still using your hands as a form of action to help spread this knowledge, to help spread this information. And I think a lot of people get stuck on, oh, I have to create content. That's good, but if that's not what you want to do, then get involved behind the scenes, because there is a lot of behind the scenes work that is involved with stuff like this. If you're good at video editing, man, you can just like edit people's videos as far, as like presentations and stuff like that. And that's how you contribute to this kind of work. Just some food for thought for people.
Yeah, and also the simple classic thing of just sharing other great works with people that need to hear it more than those that kind of get it, right? And my little add on to that is, please be inviting and a little bit enticing, if you will, when you're sharing these things. Don't just drop a link and expect people to click on it just because you dropped a link. So, yeah, think about that. Proper etiquette, chat groups, social media, all that stuff.
I don't have the time for this, man. I'm doing my podcast, and then I'm way over it, man. Seriously,
Yeah.
I'm working on the presentation, and it's gonna be a long one, but it's gonna be in French. I try to get the French side, um, and
Yeah,
and
let's keep
it,
going with that.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
and
fucking fighting.
that's a good thing too, because the more voices we have in multiple languages, then the more potentiality that we can, reach other minds. So yeah, like we need more people, speak, like bring this kind of knowledge in other languages.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh man.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Oh, yeah, real quick, just to bring it when you were talking about, like folks in academia, like the Jordan Petersons and this and that, and just all these people that have read, hundreds, if not thousands of books and this and that. Yet, yeah, without that integrated knowledge and doing the inner work and the shadow work and all these things, yeah, it's just like this egghead academia aspects of people that it's like those are the ones that want to refute the information we're talking about. Unfortunately, it's like, oh, we're not on their academic level because we don't have a master's degree or all these things. And yeah, it's a shame. There's so many gaps that are they even possible to bridge? Does it even matter, or do certain institutions just need to be razed to the ground alchemically and then built up from the ground up to have proper foundations woven hermetically sealed in the fabrics of society or whatever, right? That's a tall task, but yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead,
Oh, sorry.
Brandon. Yeah.
Oh no, hell, I was just gonna give my link because I had saw the last question because it's getting late here and I'm probably going to sleep soon. But yeah, hell, you can find me on the One Great Work Network. You can see my big ass head, and you can see me on Odyssey, BitChute, Rumble, in case anybody wants to see what I have to offer, and then check out the 24/7 live stream, which of course all of our work is on, and a lot of other many great content creators, and just trying to keep the information flowing so other people can learn and hopefully not have the message of truth drowned out. So, and that'll probably be the last thing I have to say for this recording. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. Thank you so much, man. It is a big jump today. Reborn from the ashes. I'm the host of the Laborcast. I'm on YouTube, Odyssey, Facebook, and my name is Frank Gingras. I'm gonna put the name there on the YouTube under in the comments so that people can go straight to it. It's a bilingual podcast, so it's French and English. So there's a francophone part in the page. So if you understand French, and there's the French Connection podcast on the Libracast. By the way, it's all there. You click on that. I got great people there, all French people. So it's French for the people who talk English and you don't understand a word of it. And yeah, I enjoy these kind of conversations. We need them, between us and from with the people outside of it. And like to complete what you were telling about truth telling and things like that, I mention all the time, don't believe me, just do the work, go see for yourself, go read the book, go look at the presentations. And shameless plug, just like that, the shadow work seminar of Mark Passio, I'm gonna be there, people. It's gonna be fucking awesome.
Yeah, hell, I'll probably sign up soon.
Yeah,
Myself.
Eh
shameless
oui,
plug.
mon ami. Allez-y. Yeah, we'll definitely get a proper second season of the Francophone Connection, hopefully. And yeah, with Chris Nelson as well. We've done some videos on Europa Natural Law, and some folks over there would like to participate on the French side of things. More on that later. But yeah, like I got a lot of music I've been mixing that aligns quite well to natural law, including specific references to that. And I have a wonderful podcast with Leslie Powers called Dissolving the Divide. And yeah, all that work is on the One Great Work Network. And y'all might see me actually established there as a content creator.
Yeah. Everyone
I got the
here
invite.
is
So yeah.
everyone here is on the One Great Work Network. So if you just go there and look, we got well, this way. This way is Brandon Spencer, and then we got Fred Gingras, and then we got Derek Bartolicelli, and me, Chris Nelson. You can find us there, and got all our YouTube and whatever links if people have set that up. And it's probably the easiest way to one-stop shop. You can go to, then branch off and find all of our content just going to the One Great Work Network. And that's to end on that. There's one of the podcasts, and either 2019 or 2020 when Mark came back from his one of his several hiatuses and started up the video podcast version that he's now ended, it seems, for good. In there, he talked about he has that needing to fill up cups of empty water, and that's everyone, right? And then you have people who are the pitchers of water, and well, that would be us because we have the information to give out. So we gotta put it out there so that the others can take it into our cups. And also, he has an infographic where the pitchers, they're all there, but he had like golden lines like connecting them, right? So that's what the One Great Work Network. I think he was explaining like his idea behind the One Great Work Network, and that's what we're doing here. As you see, we're all connected together and to provide information on a stream. And you can do it solo. I did it solo for a long time, and Brandon's done presentations solo, Fred's done stuff solo, Derek's done stuff. So, but when we're social animals. I'm pretty non-social by whatever defect of mine. I'm a broken human or whatever, but I'm an introvert. But anyways, I appreciate these conversations because it's not inane banter, whatever that term is that people use for small talk. Yeah, I hate small talk. I'm not good at it. I'm like silent everywhere when people just want to talk about bullshit because it doesn't interest me. So if you network with people, there's one of another idea I had was to do. I don't have the time. That's why I never started it with like trying to finish presentations. But I was gonna call it like the Great Work Launchpad, or the Great Work Tutorial, or tutoring. So it'd be to bring people on who don't know how to start and do like the open tables, Europa Natural Law, all that stuff. Is you bring people on to like, maybe you could look at it as spoon feeding them or kick them in the ass or something. That like, well, try this and try to just talk about it. Like, but then eventually you got to do your own thing. So, articles or just audio, and then you can do video. That's how I migrated. It was just text. So you didn't hear me, you didn't see me, and then I did text into audio. So then you could hear me. And then when I came back in 2023, now I had videos, and this is the first time you could see me. So, there's a progression you can go to. So if you're shy, you can build it up, and you don't have to start at the end right away where we are at. And you don't have to come on to these podcasts or do this type of networking. But if you can find other people, I think that's one of the things people are like, they want to do things with other people because they're insecure and they don't know how to do things themselves or start themselves, or they're unsure, or they don't want to fail. So they feel if they're like in a collective, in a group, then they have the reassurance of other people. So if that's what you need to get started, then yeah, find some people to do that, and then you can get started that way. Or just do articles if you're really shy like I did, and then you can build up and then be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to read my articles, because that's what I did. I was reading my articles, put some slides in there, and then you read it, and then eventually you can do presentations. You got to start somewhere. So even if you're introverted, like I am, then you start with the most introverted thing, and that's just writing, and then you can build up over the months and years and get into it. Or if you're social and you feel you need to be social with other people, well, find people and do a round table and talk about stuff. That's what the Europa Natural Law is. All those people, they most of them don't have their own content, and they just do Europa Natural Law. But that's something. They're getting together, and I guess they build a self-esteem to eventually create content as their goal. And for now, they're just in there, and they're taking steps to get there. So I'll just end it there. And if anyone wants to say anything else, otherwise, thank
Yeah,
you
just
very
real
much,
quick,
guys.
because
Yeah, go ahead.
there's folks that have taken Mark Passio's course on how to be,
That
the
too,
one
yeah.
true media. So that's a great reference for people to understand and build up their skills. Fred, go for it. Sorry.
I just wanted to say bonne soirée tout le monde. Faites attention à vous autres. En attendant.
Hey, not everyone here speaks French.
Brandon
Can
was
someone
like,
translate?
Gibber.
Yeah, like I'm the one person here who doesn't speak French, so kind of left in the dark here.
I just said take
That's a
care,
rarity.
people.
No, it's all good. It's all love.
Well, thanks everyone. I appreciate you guys coming in and watching. Those who watched the presentation, I'll be uploading just the presentation itself as just the pure presentation, not with the live stream beginning and the ending here, the Q&A and discussion. So that'll be available in its raw form. But appreciate you guys coming on. I like these conversations. And tune in. I'll be doing several more parts of the Law of Freedom as a series within the Natural Law Science of Morality series. And when I get another one done, I'll put it'll be scheduled, and I'll post it on Facebook sooner than the day of, like I did today. And hope to see some people coming in and asking questions, getting more clarification, and joining in for an enlightening information sharing and discussion at the end. I always appreciate that. So thanks a lot, everyone. Take care.